All right, welcome back everybody to Altcoin Daily. My name is Aaron. The top story of the day is this: XRP isn't a security, declares former CFTC chairman Giancarlo. Now, the reason this is significant is because back when Giancarlo was the CFTC chair, he was instrumental in making it so that both Bitcoin and Ethereum were not considered securities. He was instrumental in making it so that both Bitcoin and Ethereum were declared commodities. So we're going to get into the details of this story today. I also want to take a look at XRP's price chart, give you my thoughts on the price. And I also want to play you a clip from this 30-minute interview of David Schwartz, the CTO of Ripple. Last year, he gave an interview, and he was surprisingly asked the tough questions.
This has been the narrative for a few years, because I've talked to your CEO, Brad, fairly often, and he's made the case this is a way for banks to save money, use XRP as kind of a bridge currency. But I got to say, it doesn't seem to be happening. It seems every year this is kind of the promise, but we're not seeing a lot of adoption. What's going on there? You built Xcurrent, right, as a messaging product?
Correct.
And a lot of people seem to think it's superior to Swift. And you almost have this successful enterprise software business on your hands. And good for you, but it seems Ripple wants to do something more, which is to encourage the users of this to also wrap some XRPs into the transactions. But it sort of seems like you're shoehorning something in there that a lot of banks are like, wait a minute, we don't need this. We're just good with the messaging thing. Let's switch to stablecoins. Last week, a new kind of consortium of banks said, hey, we're rolling out this new stablecoin. Does that kind of freeze you guys out? Or what do you think of Facebook's coin? So I'll ask you quickly, too, about the price of XRP. Sort of surprised. It used to be very volatile. It used to, go from 1 cent to $4 and everywhere. But last year, it seems to have really stabilized. What's behind that? Is there sort of some hidden hand keeping that price in a narrow band? Or?
So I'll play you a pertinent clip from this interview in just a few minutes. Another top story from today's video is that Canada is getting increasingly more serious about designing a central bank digital currency. How serious? So serious, they put out a job listing for CBDC project manager, just posted on June 11th. They want to create a central bank digital currency, which is good for Bitcoin, in my opinion. Anyway, a lot of different news stories today. Let's get right to it. Everybody like the video, support the channel. XRP isn't a security, according to former CFTC chairman. So to give you some background, when Giancarlo was the chairman of the Commodities Future Trading Commission, he became a rock star of sorts in certain corners of the cryptocurrency community, helping establish criteria that eventually led both Bitcoin and Ethereum being declared commodities, more like coffee or sugar than stocks in a company. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission largely followed suit, eventually declaring that Bitcoin and Ether, the cryptocurrency powering the Ethereum blockchain, were not securities. The former chairman, Giancarlo, was deemed the crypto dad, so largely respected in the cryptocurrency community, and has just co-written a detailed argument published this morning in the International Financial Law Review for why XRP, the cryptocurrency formerly known as Ripple, was also not a security. So the bombshell paper titled Cryptocurrencies and U.S. Securities Law Beyond Bitcoin and Ether methodically reviews the criteria of the Howey test established by the SEC in 1946 to determine whether something is a security, and point by point argues that XRP does not qualify. Rather, the paper argues, like its name would indicate, the cryptocurrency is a currency of perhaps more interest to the Federal Reserve and central banks than security regulators. So this is surely a bullish sign for XRP and for Ripple. The only chink in the armor is that Giancarlo's employer is on the payroll of Ripple, the single largest owner of XRP, whose co-founders actually created the cryptocurrency. So another way to interpret this story is breaking. Ripple employee says Ripple is not a security. I mean, the fact is, because he works for this guy, he was clearly directed with the task of providing reasoning as to why XRP isn't a security. And you can read this whole article yourself. There's a lot of detailed information. Whether his reasoning is true or not, It's a good sign for XRP, but we still need somebody to officially declare it not a security. And the reason that's such a big deal is because unlike the other cryptocurrencies, which are kind of going against the legacy system, XRP wants to work with the legacy system. So they need to make sure that, they're playing by the rules. Now, as far as XRP price goes, take a look at this chart. Well, right now XRP is actually 19 cents, consolidating near the lows, and you can see this descending triangle, a series of lower highs and lower lows going all the way back to January of 2018. So you probably recall in the past 2-3 years, everybody talking about XRP being such a good investment. However, all we've been seeing is lower highs and lower lows. So I see no reason to think that XRP is going to moon anytime soon. And beyond that, you know what this chart reminds me of? This descending triangle? It reminds me of Bitcoin's descending triangle from, starting also back in January 2018. And you remember how the descending triangle in Bitcoin played out, where we saw an eventual 50% capitulation. Now, since that time, Bitcoin has seen a trend change, in my opinion. XRP has not seen a trend change, in my opinion. So, what would get me interested in possibly trading XRP is if we saw a trend change. And even if you're fundamentally bullish on this, even if you agree with his reasoning, why would you purchase XRP tokens now? It doesn't make sense to me. I would rather see a trend change. Otherwise, when we take a look at this chart in 6 months, how do we know we're not just going to see another leg down? Guys, if you appreciate this content, hit the like button. Seriously, such a small thing you can do, and it truly does help our channel a lot. And that's the last time I'll mention it in this video. Now, I do want to play you a clip. Like I said, David Schwartzman, the CTO of Ripple, in this interview from last year, answers a series of hard questions. But actually, I'm going to wait till the end of this video to play the clip since it's kind of long. Let's move on to the next story. Canada's central bank is serious about designing a CBDC. Revealing its plans in a June 11th job posting, the central bank said it was reinventing central banking and radically rethinking the nature of Canada's cash. The Bank of Canada is embarking on a program of major social significance to design a contingent system for a CBDC, which can be thought of as a banknote put in digital form. The bank wrote that. And specifically, they listed the job of CBDC project manager. And according to the job posting, Canada's CBDC should protect users' privacy, although not to the degree that cash does, remain accessible to those without bank accounts or mobile phones, work when the power is out, rival banknotes in their security so as to gain confidence among the cash-wielding public. And also, they wrote regarding the CBDC project manager, is that this central bank digital currency needs to have potential for multi-decade evolving lifespans. And we're going to end today's video with this clip. Now, in this 30-minute interview, David Schwartz is asked tough question after tough question. I'm just going to play you him answering one of the questions, but this goes along with the fact that, in my opinion, because XRP is trying to play ball with the banks and with the regulators, it is going to be a longer, more arduous road for XRP adoption. And in their, how long have they been going? Since at least 2013, in their 7+ years of existence, if you got into XRP 6-7 years ago with the promise that banks were going to buy XRP, you've waited a long time, right? Does this seem like it's going to happen in the next couple of years? Well, XRP fans will tell you yes. But as David Schwartz explains, you know what? It is an arduous process. See you tomorrow, guys.
Yeah, this has been the narrative for a few years because I've talked to your CEO, Brad, fairly often, and he's made the case this is a way for banks to save money, use XRP as kind of a bridge currency. But I got to say, it doesn't seem to be happening. It seems every year this is kind of the promise, but we're not seeing a lot of adoption. What's going on there?
I would agree that adoption of digital assets has been a little slower, you could see it as being incredibly quick or incredibly slow, depending on what time frame you think is reasonable. I would say revolutionizing international finance is not something that you would expect to happen overnight. But it is a multi-step process, and I think the first problem that we encountered, I mean, we kind of thought that we could take a direct line to settling with a digital asset, and I think a lot of people thought that, well, now we have digital assets, let's just use them for payments, and that'll be that. Part of the problem is that the payment systems are just not capable of supporting instantaneous settlement. So if you think about a payment system like SWIFT, where you just kind of push a payment message out, and you don't necessarily know the entire path, and you don't know the fees until later, you don't even know if the destination account even exists until sometime later when the payment is actually processed by the destination institution. There's no way that you could build instantaneous settlement into a system like that. So we kind of found ourselves in this situation where if we wanted institutions to settle their international payments with a digital asset, we first had to rebuild the payment messaging, sort of the plumbing. And we discovered something interesting on the way. What we discovered was that the existing plumbing was so bad, I mean, it dates back to batch computing days, that just improving that messaging was a product. That was something that banks and non-bank financial institutions would be interested in. And so we focused on building a top-notch payment network that can settle with a digital asset. And I think it's fair to say that we haven't yet proven that we can actually settle with the digital asset. We're just making that transition from building a payment network that can settle with a digital asset to figuring out where you really want to settle with a digital asset and making that settlement happen.
That's, if I can interrupt a second, that's my understanding. You built xCurrent, right, as a messaging product?
Correct.
And a lot of people seem to think it's superior to SWIFT. And you almost have this successful enterprise software business on your hands. And good for you, but it seems Ripple wants to do something more, which is to encourage the users of this to also wrap some XRPs into the transactions. But it sort of seems like you're shoehorning something in there that a lot of banks are like, wait a minute, we don't need this. We're just good with the messaging thing. So make the case for us why you need XRP in this.
I would just start out by saying I think that is a fair point. I think we do have a struggle on our hands to convince particularly banks, because banks are extremely conservative, they're very slow moving. What we've discovered is that non-bank financial institutions, payment companies are much, much more aggressive, and they're much more interested in things that can save them time and money and cost. And so we built the XRapid product as a way to kind of solve that problem. And it was adapted to the real-life situation that we were facing. We kind of had this idea that institutions would hold XRP or a digital asset, they'd make their payments with a digital asset, or regional hubs would settle with a digital asset. And for a variety of reasons, the world wasn't quite ready for that, including regulatory issues, lack of liquidity, immature ecosystem around digital assets. And so we couldn't aim directly for sort of the end state that we wanted. We had to come up with a more practical plan. XRapid is aimed at two things. So one of them is sort of remittance-type international flows, where cost is very high, and the volatility actually favors a digital asset, which is kind of bizarre. Usually people say the problem with digital assets is they have such volatility. But here, if you think about trying to pre-fund Mexican pesos on a Thursday to make payments on a Monday, that's a lot of volatility in Mexican pesos. Whereas if you can use XRP, which can move across the planet in just a couple of seconds, the volatility is actually less. Even though XRP is inherently more volatile, you're only holding it for the minute or two it takes to complete the transaction. And I think the other thing that XRapid handles is you might have a bank that doesn't want to touch a digital asset. They're like, we can't have XRP on our books, we can't buy it, we can't sell it, it's just too much of a regulatory challenge for us. But let's say they want to make a payment in Mexico, and they don't want to have to pre-fund, and they don't want to have to get confirmation 3 days later. What they can do is they can have an XRapid customer that probably won't be a bank. It'll be a payment company or some other type of institution that uses a digital asset to buy the Mexican pesos as an internal treasury function and then offers those Mexican pesos to the bank. So it's a workaround to the limitations that we found that we think is adapted to the situation that we're in today.